to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. Instructions on exiting the building and review of technology options.
Great, thank you. So for those in the room, there are doors on either side of the back of the auditorium, and you can turn right or left to find a way out of the building in case of an emergency. Thank you to those who are participating remotely. If you would like to make a comment during those sections of the agenda, please feel free to turn your camera on and we'll call on you. Or you can message me in the chat indicating that you would like to speak, and we will call on you when we get to that portion. We are not monitoring the chat for content, so if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please do so with your voice. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order of agenda items? Megan? No? We all set? Okay.
Yep, all set.
Good enough. Then we'll move on to item 4, comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. And I have a sense that there's a couple people who want to speak. So who would like to go first? And Betty, just make sure the light is turned on, the little green light.
Okay. Actually, I have to go get my glasses for a second here.
Don't you have them on? Oh, those are sunglasses.
Dos, tres, cuatro,
Thank you.
cinco, and should I just reserve one here for Megan?
Megan, do you want one of these handouts reserved for you? We can put it in your
That
mailbox.
would be great.
Okay.
Okay. I think we're all set here. All right. Betty Malizia, and I chair the Common Area for Dogs Committee. Thank you. And you can imagine what I'm here to talk about. We're very happy to see that the dog park is going in, and just here to share some of our concerns around that, and hopefully be part of the solution with you, help you. You can see this is a somewhat rough map of the dog park area, but it has measurements, and I've got committed committee members who've spent a lot of time with me up there, either walking the boundaries on the outside of the perimeter of the fence, or helping me measure things. And I think you've got a pretty good colored rendition or depiction of what we've got up there. And as I said, we've been waiting for it for a long time, and we want to get it right. And the number one thing we wanted to see was to have the park large enough to accommodate quite a number of dogs, because it's going to be an area that is highly visible by probably thousands of people who are going to say, gee, let's go home and get our dog and bring him back. So size is probably there's a couple of critical pieces of this. And the first one that we're concerned about right now is the size of the dog park. And it started out as something that when the first application went into the DRB, it was 2.52 acres, I think. 2.53. And then when the DRB directed us to address the wetlands that are in the northeast corner of the park, it reduced the size to 2.19 acres. And as you can see right now, the current space is, I don't know, visually, to me, it looks like it's probably a third, if that, of the space that we originally had in mind. So I think it's actually about an acre. And there are a variety of reasons. I can imagine what the staff who were involved in overseeing this project. There are a number of challenges to that site. This rectangle is actually not a good or accurate way to look at that particular piece of land. The elevation changes quite a bit from the north to the south. It goes up quite a bit. And there are some features to the property that, or to the site that are challenging for them to install fencing on and around for safety reasons and for practical reasons. However, there's a lot of this that I think the whole green area that you can see up at the top, that's all that was left out of the dog park. That's the remaining part that was within the boundaries of the DRP approved site plan. And we have now got that orange area in the middle, basically the orange area in the middle. The rest of it has been basically removed for either being a wetland on the northeast corner, and then on the the northwest corner, there's a ledge there that had to be avoided. It's about a 10-12 foot ledge that's pretty steep that had to be avoided and cut out of the park. So just doing those two things would bring it down to, approximately 2 acres, if that. And I think we really need to look at how do we add back in as much of that green area that you see going straight across the top. How do we look at the site and, practically speaking, add that? That's part of the DRB approved site plan. Over on the southeast, we're all looking at it as if that was north and south, but on the southeast corner, there's a great large area of vegetation, sumac and everything. And
Is that where the question mark is?
yeah, we can tell, we know how far it goes south. We know the difference between where the current fence is, and where it's supposed to be, the border is, or the boundary. But what we don't know is we couldn't measure from the orange corner there of the current park over to the east. That we don't know, but it's supposed to be part of the park. And there's quite a bit. There's a large sumac, I don't know if you call them bushes or whatever, there. And I think staff may have thought that they need to either get rid of it or avoid it with the fence. And some of us feel that it should have been included in the space for the dogs, because this is a wonderful site for dogs. It really will be a wonderful site when these things are addressed. So there are things I think that may have been avoided, some of which needed to be avoided, and other things that may have been avoided that people made assumptions around whether or not they were safe for dogs and whether or not maintenance was going to be an issue. And I think the committee should be involved in whatever discussions go on around how we remedy this as far as the size goes.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
To your knowledge, is the ledge only where you have the greeny blue stripes, both east and west?
That's where there's a steep ledge.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's where there's literally you could step
On the
off
east
it.
side, yeah.
Yes. Then in the where
no. North, south. The
where
west
you-
side. Sorry.
along the top, along the south of the current space, that orange line on the south side, the long one, there's a knoll that is stone, glacial stone or whatever. There's what I call it a knoll, but there is stone there. But rather than avoiding it and going around it to the south, which would keep the dog park larger, they went around, it was put in, the fence was installed around the north side of it. But you can imagine, right now, we lost 84 feet. And it's the ledge, I mean, that knoll is definitely not 84 feet wide. So, and I've walked up there numerous times with various people, and it certainly, these things, it takes some finesse and some creativity, but I think we can work, if we can work together, communication is key, listening is a key, and I think the committee can really be helpful on mitigating, what's happened here. But you can see that green area, we've lost probably 40% of the park since we started this process.
And,
So.
and the top of that that's closest to the Wheeler House, that
Yes.
is not ledge.
That is not ledge.
Okay.
If you
I
can
was
see
thinking
that,
that's where the ledge was.
yeah, no, it's between there, but it's closer to the orange line of the park. Okay. The other thing that you're going to have to address, and I think it's a smaller issue for somebody else than it is for us and for this, the change of the perimeter, is that there's a post with an electrical box on it, and that's inside by 49 feet.
Oh, is that where that red dot is?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the post, and it's 35 feet north of the fence. So that eats up an enormous part of the park too, by staff having put that southern boundary of the park straight across, because they assumed we needed to avoid that stone, and we needed to avoid that post, and to go straight across to comply with the DRB application. That's how it ended up being straight across the top. And again, our feeling is, or our opinion is, I will say opinion, because we've got people on this committee who have lots of experience and knowledge. And I would say it's a shame that we aren't consulted on these things. So anyway, here is where we're at. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if, where things are going and what the process is going to be for addressing this, but I guess the committee, we feel that this park, if it can be addressed sometime soon, we should not open the park, because you can see how small that park is.
And if
And,
it,
and if people start using that park, I think we could end up with this becoming a back burner item to address, in the future. And it's not right. It should be fixed. This should be fixed. Should be corrected. We've been waiting 3 years. This is what we were told we were going to get. The community wanted a 3-acre park, and we knew we couldn't fit a 3-acre park on there. But so we agreed to 2.5, and we were told we could do 2.5. We could get it in there, and then we were told 2, and now this is showing us probably 1 acre if we're lucky. And that's just not acceptable as far as the committee's concerned. And I think as far as most of the community, because one of the reasons we're doing this is so that we can help keep more dogs. There are kind of 3 silos of dog people, well, maybe 4. But you've got the people who have small dogs and are willing to use a small, very small dog park. There are people who have large dogs who need a space that a tiny, small dog park is not appropriate, but they feel their dog needs to be in a secure, fenced-in area. Even we've got a committee member who has a husky, and he's afraid to let his husky off leash because he said he'll just take off. So he needs an area that's fenced in. We've got somebody with a Newfie, 2 Newfies. Where are they? How are they going to use this small space? So there are all kinds of dogs, but then there are still going to be, so there are dog owners that are running their dogs off leash right now. Yeah. there are dogs running off leash right now that I think this park will satisfy their needs. It's not going to satisfy all the needs of all the dogs that are running off leash, but I think some people run their dogs off leash who would feel this park was appropriate if it was larger and it was where it should be. I mean, if it was the size it should be, they'd feel like their dog had at least some, some room to run. And then there are going to be people that we're going to have to look at. How do we address the needs of people who have dogs that really need a lot of open space? But that's for another day. That's not for tonight. So, another major issue is accessibility. And some of us who are familiar with accessibility would question whether or not the entrance is actually accessible. It's definitely not wheelchair accessible. Just the surface material isn't. You couldn't get in with a wheelchair. It's pea gravel, and we know folks who use wheelchairs and who could not get into the dog park, and we cannot say, well, there's some people who just can't use this dog park. This dog park has to be open to everybody. So that is you balance it. Size and accessibility are two critical features. Okay? And I would say next would come shade and some seating, but shade, this thing is totally out in the sun. So, I think that's an amenity that is quite important in a space like this. But accessibility and size are our first two challenges.
Okay.
Okay?
So if I were to summarize, Betty, size is a concern, and you're willing, or the committee is interested in working to add back some or all of the light green area.
Mm-hmm.
And you're requesting that the committee should be a greater part of decision-making, or at least
Absolutely.
included in the conversations.
We don't have people who have built dog parks.
Right.
We are people who installed this. Well, the people who installed it may have built other dog parks. People supervising haven't built dog parks.
Okay. And then importantly, accessibility.
Accessibility.
And then there's other improvements, like planting some more
there's
trees.
other things that aren't,
But that,
won't keep it closed.
okay.
But we just feel strongly that it needs to
Okay.
be enlarged. And again, those areas that you asked about, we can help in problem solving around those areas that are stone, ledges or knolls, and the vegetation on the east side, and what could be done. And I think it will take some a little bit of direction from leadership, I think, in saying, well, this dog park's important, and it may mean that you have to weed whack instead of mowing. It may be that you have to put some time into this, more than you think. And if that's the case, I'd say, give us an estimate of what it would cost you to take care of it, and then we need to talk about how we find the funding to make sure there's enough human resources to take care of the park.
Okay.
Okay?
Are there other individuals who would like to comment? Okay, we got one. Barb?
Wants to speak too.
Okay. I didn't see, she's hidden behind.
Hi, Barbara Service. I live in Summer Woods. I was the chair of the original dog park task force back in the dark ages, or so it seems now. And I just wanted to comment that we're all kidding, but we all remember on June 5th, 2019, the council approved a plan that included a larger dog park than what's here. And then came the perfect storm. So in the perfect storm, we had COVID. I don't need to remind you about that. We had two significant staff people who were changed, and there were just a lot of transitions. And so we're hoping that that perfect storm can be remedied. There was conversation I heard, and you know about the things you hear, but there was conversation I heard that there was a suggestion, well, let's wait and see what the public has to say. I can tell you that I have heard already from people who came to the meetings that we conducted in 2018 and 2019 saying, you promised us, and our promise has been broken. And I think that the council committed to the plan, the committee committed to the plan, everybody was around it, and we have now broken that promise. And this is not about pointing fingers. This is about a perfect storm of everything that could happen did happen. But I'm really hoping that we will be able to preserve all of our integrity by moving a little more quickly to remedy the situation and to expand the dog park so we can have an opening. I agree. We should not open that park until it's bigger, because what we're going to see is a lot of people going, really? Is this all we get? Because there were a lot of people who came to open meetings and contributed to the conversation and have an expectation. And it looks really great when you first come down Dorset Street, and you see it, and then you realize the size of it, and it's not going to work. And as you get closer, you then see the access issues. And one of the people who came faithfully to those meetings is a woman who uses a wheelchair to walk her dog, and she will not be able to take her dog to that dog park because she won't be able to get into the entrance. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Muriel? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm Muriel Moore. I am also on the committee for the,
Muriel, will you take the mic and push it there? Thank you.
All right.
We want to hear you, and so do people at home.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for your time. I just wanted to also comment as a member of the committee that I too feel that the dog park is too small. And you've heard much about that tonight. The only thing that I will add that the committee felt as part of our discussion was that we hoped that this increase in size and doing this would help to alleviate the problem of dogs running loose in like Red Rocks, Wheeler Nature Area, that kind of thing. That this would help by having a dog park that was big enough to accommodate dogs who really needed to run. As you can see, I do have limited mobility, and the park is not ADA compliant. And I think that is something that has surprised me, that with brand new construction, this park from the get-go is not going to be ADA compliant. And I feel it should be. Right now, I would have great difficulty taking my dog to a dog park and trying to navigate that one, particularly because I have problems with like uneven ground, in walking around. And there are no paths in the park. There's nothing to help with that kind of thing. And I do feel it should be available to all in the community. And to me, this also speaks to your recent Declaration of Inclusion that you all signed here recently and agreed to. I would like to also just add that I believe that money is available to really make this dog park something special. And that is through the American Rescue Funds. I'm interested that the city is currently, doing a community survey asking how to use $3 million that is supposedly unallocated to this point in time. Well, I think if you added some money into this dog park, you could cover what is required. And I feel that this is something that should be done. I think there's no reason not to have a first-class resource for everyone in the city and their canine companions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this topic? How about at home? Okay, is there anyone who would like to speak on a different topic?
Linda just
Oh.
turned green.
I'm sorry. Who
Could I
went
say
green?
something? Helen,
Oh, sure.
Helen, it's
Yes, Linda, I'm sorry.
Linda. I've been on the dog park for quite a while. And I have to say, yes, it's too small, but I do a lot of walking, as does Helen. I see her everywhere like I am. And I have to say that I really feel if we're looking for money and looking to extend, the dog park needs to be open for people to use now. And we need a plan for the spring, because the more we talk about it, the more delay, and we won't have it before winter. And I really don't feel the dog committee will have any credibility. It's not good now. You keep telling me, Linda, and I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking for people on Hayes and Heinsberg Road and Dorset who have dogs. So I'm just saying, we need to weigh, can we do it now with the promise that land is going to be there first thing in the spring, so that we can thoughtfully think about how we're going to fund it and how we're going to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then Austin
Thank you.
Palmer?
Yes, thank you. I'm on the committee as well. I'm kind of the new kid on the committee, and new to a lot of these issues. I just like to underscore and concur with everything that my co-committee members have said. I thought Muriel was very eloquent in making her points. And I was the one, I think, on the committee who argued most vigorously for getting the park open this summer. And that had a lot to do with just the credibility of the committee and the credibility of the city to get something done that it had promised to do 3 years ago. And I was willing, as seriously as I take disability issues and the ADA, I was willing to say, let's just get the park open so that we have something to show for ourselves. And then as soon as we get the park open, we will put all of our energy into making it ADA compliant and accessible. But as it turns out, even that is not going to work because of the size, because of the way that the place has been fenced, and the what's happened is basically a disaster. And so I'm in full agreement with Muriel that we need to get this right. If we have to wait another year, that's, I guess, what we have to do. But it doesn't just it doesn't just detract from the credibility of the committee. Nobody knows about the committee, but it detracts from the credibility of South Burlington as a city and as a community. So I just implore you to get serious about this. We have hundreds, I don't know, probably thousands of people who think of their dogs as one of their family members. Mm-hmm. And like me, they need a dog park in order to responsibly provide for their dog and give them the exercise and the recreational time that they need without letting them go off leash or otherwise, invade on other people's property or personhood. And providing a workable dog park is absolutely essential to making this a community where people want to live. I don't know how to say that more simply. It's critical, and we need the area enlarged as much as possible, as close to the 2 acres that we were expecting, and we need to make it ADA compliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Oh, yes.
I also went and.
Lisa, would you
sorry,
tell everyone?
Lisa Yankowski, I'm on the Common Area for Dogs Committee also, and I help oversee Red Rocks Park. So, yes, I do see a lot of dogs. I met this wonderful chocolate newfie yesterday. The problem with the dog park is we were approved for a much larger area, and I'm not sure what happened when they were putting in the fencing. So, I believe we need to comply with what we were approved for by the DRB, and it's not so much an issue with ADA accessibility, it's accessibility for anybody, and I'm not sure if you can even open the gate if you had to outward to try to get to the park is an issue right now, because there's a dirt berm and trying to get up and over that. That was also addressed on the permit from the DRB. So there's supposed to be like a pathway from the parking area across to the entrance to the dog park, and that has not happened. So we do need help trying to get the park enlarged to what it's supposed to be and to get that fixed so that people will be able to actually get over there without having to climb up over a dirt berm. Thank you.
All right, any other comments on, oh, yes.
Good evening, members. My name's Sean Maloney. I'm a resident of South Burlington, and I've been I created the Facebook page Friends of South Burlington Dog Park 3 years ago, and I've also been involved with Betty as far as trying to get more attention to the dog park. And my daughter, who's now a high school senior, started participating in this process when she was in 7th grade. And the delays that keep going, as have been mentioned, and I hate meetings where people repeat themselves, but I gotta be me. It really is crazy to think about like how long the signs have been up, how long we've been talking to people, citizens of the area, the excitement about the dog park, the potential of just so many activities for dog owners and the community, and then just to have these continuous delays. This has got to be a priority. It was approved for the certain size, and it's not even close to that. So it's not even a question of compromising. It's a question of someone just like took the reins and ran with it and did their own thing. And that's unfortunate, but perspective. My dog was 6 when we started this whole thing, and now he's 11. I'd like to see him enjoy a dog park in the area rather than like driving up to Star Farm or over to Essex. And for the amount that like what you've done with the community as far as building the center and just expanding on it, like developing this idea of like a community in South Burlington, to not have like this dog park access done already is really disappointing. And so anyways, my daughter would be here. She's might be on her way, but that's the message that she wanted to convey, is that like as a dog owner, dog lover, dog rescue volunteer, to not have this space available is really crazy. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else on any topic? Okay, thank you very much. That was very informative, and I appreciate the map. Moving on then to announcements and the city manager's report. So Tom, would you like to start with announcements?
Nothing really to report other than I would just say I would love to know why the dog park wasn't built as large as it was approved for, but that'll be probably a discussion at a later meeting at a warned time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh, wait, didn't Senator Chittenden run the primary? What happened?
I was successful. Thank you for asking, Tim.
Well, that's good to know.
Cheers. Cheers.
Matt?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, yes, mentioning the election, it was my first opportunity as a city councilor to participate as a member of the Board of Civil Authority in the elections, and what an amazing experience. I learned a lot, and I want to thank Donna Kimville. I had no idea how much appreciation that we all owe her for running a successful election. It is a really challenging, technological, she doesn't sleep for like 38 hours, and it's just amazing how it all comes together. I will say we have a new polling place, so we spent a lot of time, and I was at that new polling place. So we spent a lot of time explaining that it is a new polling place, and it's not a mistake. This is planned because we have 5 now districts. I think we can do a better. I think it's a great polling place. It's safe, it's secure, it's beautiful. I was glad that I got that posting, but I think we can do a better. And I suggest we keep it, in my opinion. But I think we can do a better job notifying people who are going to come on November 8th for the general election about where to vote. And I take that upon myself, and I urge everyone else, whatever messaging channels you can, whatever way for signage that we can use, so people will know not to go to the middle school, but to come to City Hall if they're in Chittenden 8. So there's that. I also participate. Are we talking about committees here, or no? We say that for later.
Well, as a liaison, you can talk about that committee.
As a liaison for the Bike and Ped Committee, we talked about a lot of things, but one of the things that we talked about in our meeting last week was the East-West Crossing Design Workshop that's happening on August 31st. As a pedestrian, as a biker, if you're interested in how we get from the Staples Plaza over this $10 million, $12 million bridge that we're building over to our side, participate in the workshop, because I think it will be very valuable to have everyone's input on how we get from east to west. And I have, over the last 2 weeks, met with the Committee for the Common Area of Dogs and had multiple discussions with Betty and her team, and they do a wonderful job as advocates for guardians of dogs and dogs in our community, and I understand their frustrations completely. Full disclosure, I have a St. Bernard puppy and would very much like that dog park to be open. I have opinions that may differ from the rest of the dog park committee. I think absolutely 100% it needs to be accessible. We need to change the entrance so it's safe for dogs and dog guardians. We need to make it easier for people to access the site. And I think we can make those improvements without going through the permitting process, without contracting again with Middlebury Fence Company, who built an amazing fence. It's just not the way that was intended. I may disagree with some on the dog park committee in that I do want this open. I think there will be, if we have to go through a permitting process, if we have to wait at the back of the line to get the contractor back here, we could be looking at another 9 months. I don't want, so the comment that Betty made, which is really important, if we have to go through that process, if we're told that there's no way that we can fix this until we go through the permitting process, until we can get the contractor back, I think it's going to have a really difficult time having people standing on the outside of that beautiful fence looking in. And the concern that Betty articulated very well, which is, well, then we're going to get complacent. As long as I'm on the city council, I'm not going to be complacent, and I don't think anyone else is either. We know what was promised 3 years ago, and we didn't deliver, but we still can. There's still time. But job number one is fixing the entrance so it's safe, fixing the entrance so it's accessible. And I think we can do that. I hope we can do that, and I'm going to make sure that we do.
Okay, thank you. Tim, if you don't mind, I did notice your daughter's here. Would she like to make a couple comments? We usually don't go back on the agenda, but I like to make the exception for some. No bad words. Yeah, then I won't do it again.
Hello, I'm on. Yeah, it is. I'm Anna Maloney, and I was originally on the Dog Community Council when I was in 8th grade, and now I'm graduating high school, and we have worked so hard. I remember when I was younger, and we didn't have any hope of there being built one for a really, really long time and whatnot. And so now to find out that we weren't given the adequate space, and then finding out the person who told us we originally were going to have that space resigned and whatnot, just kind of shocked me that South Burlington could be like that, because I've lived here my entire life. I've been in the same house since I was a little kid, And having this dog park would be just so much better for not only South Burlington, but also like people of Heinsberg and whatnot, because the closest good dog park is all the way downtown Burlington. So if we were able to like have the space that originally we requested and whatnot, and like have adequate like entrance and make sure people who have like wheelchairs can also be accommodated, because they have dogs too and would like to bring their dog to a dog park because they might not be able to do hikes and whatnot with their dogs. And also having a place for shade and whatnot, because dogs will get overheated and you don't want to have have your dog just go in the car for the shade. You'd rather have it in the dog park where you yourself can also be in the shade and whatnot too. And also having it it seems finished too, and I hope that it can open pretty soon too, because I would like to bring my dog there before he's too old for it and whatnot. And with a Saint Bernard puppy, definitely that would be a good idea. But having the dog park the adequate size would just be better for the people and their dogs, because there's most of my friends who live here in South Burlington have a dog and whatnot, and usually just have to take them on hikes instead of building a better community with the other dog owners here in South Burlington and whatnot. And we can have dog events at the dog park. We had a couple of years back, we had a Halloween costume contest when we were first trying to get the dog park. And so there can be little events like that where people can come and celebrate dogs and whatnot all together and build a community of South Burlington. So
Thank you very much. Okay, top that, Tim.
I can't. So I was the presiding officer at the Chamberlain School District for the primary election, and it went very smoothly. The new machines, I thought, operated well. They were a little slower, but you got at least a ding-ding, if the vote went through correctly. What I really liked was the fact that the write-ins deviate from the old path into the hopper and actually go into a separate compartment that's separated physically from the rest of the ballots. So when it was time to retrieve those, you didn't have to pull everything out and then imagine that some are mixed in with the others and then have to sort through the whole thing. The really magical part of it was that we didn't even have to check the write-in ballots at all, because the machines, if you chose on the menu at closing the poll time, would spit out a nice ticker tape of a scan of every write-in for every primary for every race. So by taking that, you could go through, let's say, Democratic governor and find, Joe Schmo, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck. In the Democratic one, Phil Scott, Phil Scott, Phil Scott, Phil Scott, Phil Scott, Phil Scott, Phil Scott. Should I keep going?
Yeah.
And then you could just tally them very quickly without having to sort through, a stack of ballots for, that are separated by Dem, Republican, and Progressive. So that's a really nice feature that I didn't really know about when we went in, but when we printed that out, it became very useful. So that was good. I did get a couple texts from residents who were concerned about some confusion over the new district. And I did make an effort by posting in that Facebook group, SB VT Community Watch, about the news district with a link to the PDF of the map and a link to a PDF of all the streets that were affected, telling people what to look for to see if their street was affected and if you were in 8. And I also posted that in the SEQ Front Porch Forum. But that being said, I think before the primary, we might want to call upon Avalon and the other paper to have a front page story, maybe a couple of weeks before the election, saying, check these streets to make sure that you vote in the same place. Otherwise, you're going to be going to City Hall. So other than that, I had some conversations with a resident on Golf Course Road about Mr. Hergenrother's project on Long Drive and the amount of noise coming from the ledge chipping for the new stormwater permit that they need. I personally went up to Golf Course Road on Friday and took a handheld realistic sound meter and did some measurements. The noise is a little bit reduced from what it was originally 2 years ago because it's behind a small hillock. It's down closer to the pan of the land where the golfing actually takes place on the backside, and they're digging this really narrow trench in between the trees to put in a stormwater conveyance tube of some sort. So I think there was an email that came out Friday saying that they were 90% done. I didn't hear any chipping today, so I don't know if they're done, but they might be, hopefully, so that would be great. Anyway, we talked about that a couple times, and
Good.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I think the good news is we had the largest primary turnout, 25% or second largest. So at least a lot of people who had a new polling spot figured that out. They may have had to make a couple trips, but they figured it out. So now they know, and it should be run a little more smoothly in that respect next year. Well, I've had a really busy couple weeks. I am the liaison for the Natural Resources Committee. And when I visited their meeting or sat through it, they had two questions for us. So at some point, the council may want to discuss this. They wanted to know really what their role with the DRB should be. They used to, they felt, have a bigger role, and it just isn't clear to them. The other thing is that we have an open space plan, and they were questioning me, and of course I didn't have the answers. What does the council want them to do about enacting or working on that open space plan? So those are some things that I bring back to you of their interests. I enjoyed going to the first, I think it really is the first orientation that we had for all committees, educating them again about the ins and outs of open meeting law and committee work and their roles as committee members. And so Jesse did a great overview of kind of the city, and then Colin went through the legal stuff. And so I think it was well received, and it was great to see that many people. I also attended kind of a hearing, I guess, for the climate task force, and that was good. And then I worked the elections, 11 hours. It was a long day, but I agree with Tim and Matt and oh, I forgot Megan. We'll get you next, Megan. That it really did work much better, and I was pleased with that. I also attended the Planning Commission meeting, and I also met with the Vermont Gas Systems, oh, they don't call it that, I'm sorry, VGS, about our suggestion or, I don't know, recommendation for the ordinance, and heard from them. I got the chance, it was, I think, a really good meeting. Both Jesse and I met together with them, and we kind of pursued ways that they may be able to help us and consider some advice and know-how. So that was good. That's all. And Megan.
Sure. Well, I can certainly speak now. I know that we have another item for the committee assignments. I might hold off on the affordable housing and the housing trust fund committee till then, but just don't want to be the sole counselor to say I have nothing other than the dog park. I agree with all of you there that I don't quite understand what happened, and that this just has to get fixed. We need to move that fence. So I just want that to be focused ASAP. I agree that this has got to be done yesterday. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. City manager.
So I will definitely put on a future council agenda dog parks. I'll give you a full update.
Okay.
A couple of other things for me. If for residents who are here in the audience or watching at home, you have until midnight to pay your taxes. Put them in the drop box here at City Hall. As has been mentioned, we have two really critical opportunities for public feedback out. There's a survey up for the Climate Action Plan. Encourage folks to go online and review that plan and provide feedback, as well as the ARPA survey, which is closing on August 26th, if folks want to provide final comments on how the council should consider using those dollars. Megan may be talking about this later, but huge thanks to the Affordable Housing Committee and Housing Trust Fund Committee for spending all morning on Friday reviewing the RFPs we received for the use of ARPA funds for to incentivize the development of affordable housing. They are planning to bring you those recommendations on September 6th, so stay tuned for those. Thanks to Helen and the committee members who came to the orientation. Colin and I had a lot of fun with that and look forward to doing it every year. Quick update on the Dorset Street signal work. We finally received our VTrans permit to bid out that project. It's called a 111 permit that we have to get from VTrans to bid that out. We hope to have the bids back by September. It is a very complicated project, so I think we will likely be coming forward to you with some project updates on that later on. As Helen and others said, great turnout, is the second highest ever state primary turnout on election day. 32.3% of registered voters voted for 5,225 South Burlington residents. And agree with Matt, huge amounts of kudos to Donna Kinville and to all of our BCA members who make that happen. We also had our most successful library program to date of Jennifer's tenure with us with the Summer Reads program. We had 306 kids submit 1,996 submittals for the summer reading program, and an additional 432 people attend programs. So thanks to Kelly and Natasha for a really well planned programming. Thank you for the reminder about the bike ped bridge. Public hearing on August 31st here in this room at 6:30. We will be presenting 3 design options to the community for feedback on what to move forward. I've gotten a little preview of them. They're really exciting. Really encourage people to tune into that. And then finally, just the Illuminate Vermont Festival, which will be December 16th and 17th on Market Street this winter. We got the ACCD grant for that. Is coming along. Travis Ladd and Rec is doing a great job planning that. The website, www.illuminatevermont.com, is up and running. You can track progress there. In Eastern Real Estate, the new owners of the mall are sponsoring the events in this room for that festival. So nice community contribution.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, the consent agenda. There are 5 items. The disbursements, minutes from our steering committee meeting of June 22nd, an update from the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority appointed designee, the financial statements for July 2022, and approving a grant for engineering design of Logwood Stormwater Infiltration Project.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second. Is there any discussion? Megan?
Yeah, there was, let me just find it. The Sunbelt rentals for the shovel. I was just curious why we're renting a shovel. Is this a special kind of shovel that we normally don't have? It's Sunbelt rentals. Shovel for $35. I mean, I know it's not a big charge, but I was just curious.
Hi, Megan. This is Andrew. I'd have to get back to you on that. I can text Tom and ask him. That might have been.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
That's all.
Yep.
All right, if there's no further discussion.
We might have one.
Oops, Tim has a question.
Yeah, there was also is that from, I'm sorry, that's from August 1st, my fault. Never mind, I'm good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Great, all right, so if you're ready for the vote, all those in favor of the consent agenda as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's,
I
and aye.
There you go. Very good.
So that's 5-0, and it is approved. We'll move on to number 7, opportunity for counselors and the public to share information and resources on climate change. So, Matt?
Yeah, much has happened in the past 2 weeks. Key, of course, is the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, approved by Congress, which will send $369 billion to the states, including a significant amount to Vermont to make sure our homes are more energy efficient and that more people drive zero emission vehicles. But even though that's the federal issue, and we're going to wait and see how the money sugars off here in Vermont and how it can be spent, there's action happening at the state level, significant action. Just today, I attended 2 different meetings of the Vermont Climate Council. That's the 23-member appointed body to design climate policy in Vermont, including the steering committee and the transportation task group, which is creating a carbon reduction strategy to ensure that those that can't live near the employment centers because they can't afford homes are the ones that we're focusing on to get zero emission vehicles or higher mileage vehicles so we can reduce transportation emissions. Those meetings are all open to the public. I encourage you to attend. You can find them at climatechange.vermont.gov. In addition, there's 2 very significant developments at the state level that have occurred over the past couple of weeks. The first is in transportation. A week ago from today, last Monday, the Vermont Interagency Committee on Administrative Rules, also known as ICAR, which is made up of officials with Governor Scott's administration, approved the Clean Car and Clean Truck 2 standard. This is a California regulation which dictates how many cars must be zero-emission vehicles, scaling up. So if this becomes the regulation, all the car lots on Shelburne Road and all throughout Vermont, 35% of those vehicles on the lot will need to be zero-emission vehicles by 2026. By 2035, 100% of those vehicles need to be zero-emission vehicles. The same is true for trucks, but to a lesser degree. Medium and heavy-duty trucks, think of the garbage trucks and the buses and the fuel trucks, will have to be, 30% will have to be electric or zero-emission by the end of the decade. The other key thing that's happening is in the thermal space. So over the past year, the Department of Public Service has developed an updated energy code. This is the Residential Building Energy Standard and Commercial Building Energy Standard, called RBs and CBs in short. This is how we make sure there is uniformity in building and design throughout Vermont to ensure the highest levels of energy efficiency and the use of renewable energy. This will become part of the regulation, will be before ICAR in October, and will likely be enforced and enacted in January. So a lot of things happening at the federal level, and a lot of things are happening at the state level, but there's not a lot of information about it, and that's why I appreciate the opportunity that you provided, Chair Reilly, to bring them up here.
Great. Anyone else have?
Yeah,
Tim?
just to add on to that, I'm glad that Congress is able to pass the IRA. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to have any effect on inflation for quite a few years, if any at all, but at least the name helped identify it. The other point about the electric vehicle tax incentives that are featured in that bill will probably have no effect here in Vermont for many, many years because it requires the cars to have 100% of their batteries be built in the United States. So until those batteries are furnished in such a way that meets that bill specifications, those tax incentives won't be available on any cars that you buy here. But, you know, it's a direction to move in, and I'm glad that they passed it. So and we're getting there. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Megan, you have anything, or Tom?
I certainly celebrated when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. I think that's a major piece of legislation. So, and I think that, I don't know, I think we'll see with regard to all the points that Tim raised, but I have hope that, you know, there will be incentives for manufacturing to develop in this country, which is a positive. And I also think that it will keep prices lower than it would be if this hadn't passed. So I think that's where the inflation reduction is occurring. It's maintaining as opposed to just letting things continue. So I just think it was a major piece of legislation, and I'm celebrating. We have to celebrate these victories.
Great. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Moving on to item 8. Introducing the ordinance on regulating fuels for heating and hot water in new construction, and consider setting a public hearing for September 19th of this year. We're going to get an update from the staff on plans to resource local education and enforcement. And Jesse and Colin and our fire chief, Steve Locke, will be presenting. Yes. Yes.
Well, I didn't even time to talk on the, is this the time to talk on the climate action task force, or you just said public input, and I wasn't quite sure if you went over that, Ellen, or did it a different time?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. You did even send me an email. No, you probably should have done it, so let's go back to that and then.
Sure, this is okay?
That's fine. Oh, yeah. I apologize.
Hi, John Bosange from Golf Course Road. I will say before I begin how reassuring it is to hear how smoothly our elections went, given the turmoil and everything nationally we hear. And here we are with such great reports, another polling place and the smooth operating machines. Just really nice to have that happen in our town, considering what we hear nationally. But I'm here to speak in support of the recommendations given to you from your Climate Action Task Force. I'm assuming, and I'm going to begin by assuming there are very few climate change deniers in our town, in the audience or listening tonight. This is a well-educated community who accepts the science that explains the devastating impact that humans have had on the heating of our planet. It's not natural, but it is human caused. But I do think maybe, just maybe, there are climate delayers in our city, and that worries me a bit, and that's why I'm here to speak with you for just a few minutes. Your Climate Action Task Force asks you to adopt a plan to reduce South Burlington's carbon footprint beginning in January 2023. By focusing on homes and commercial buildings, which contribute to what I didn't know was 34% of the carbon greenhouse gases in our city. And to utilize renewable primary heating systems, which means using electricity, maybe wood chips, electric heat pumps beginning in 2023. That plan recommends that all new buildings have a carbon-free primary heating system and hot water system in order to receive a permit to build. Well, there's nothing novel really about this type of ordinance. It's been done all over the country, as we know, and as you know, even next door to a city in Burlington. And the report gives us examples after examples of cities across America who have done this type of ordinance, and it's been effective. And the research shows, and I didn't know this until I read the report, that such ordinances significantly reduce energy use and consequently reduce our carbon footprint. And most importantly, the construction of energy-efficient homes that do not use fossil fuels have similar construction costs. So now my question is, how can we not do this? What would be any reason not to adopt these recommendations and make them binding to any new construction or in a developer's building plans? I can't imagine. I was thinking about this, and I just can't imagine a builder telling us that they do not support energy efficiency. They do not believe in helping reduce utility costs and at the same time help reduce our carbon footprint. Or that they think we can delay the inevitable because we have time to do so. They know, as we do, that just the opposite is true, and there's no turning back now. What builder is going to tell a younger and newer generation of homeowners, home buyers, that they can't afford to include the requirements in an ordinance when we know now just the opposite is true? Nor can I imagine a developer telling us that they want to keep the cost of homes down and build affordable apartments, condominiums, and single-family homes, so they will only build like we've built in the past, with no concern for the carbon footprint of those affordable housing units. It's inconceivable for me to think that people will be forced to live in homes that are still heated by fossil fuel systems. Of course, a developer can build mixed housing units for our children's future. All electric construction and the use of primary heating systems is less expensive to build. A developer's sales will be booming, I think, just booming, as a younger generation responds positively to their commitment to help mitigate the climate crisis. No builder will be telling younger and new buyers that they just must absorb the cost of a carbon-free place of living. That's just not true. What a public relations nightmare that would be for a developer. Who's going to buy a home from them? Smart developers will stay ahead of the curve on this one. They'll want to promote their green homes and support of doing their part to deal with the climate crisis that's upon us now. Smart developers will advertise their commitment to community and help mitigate the climate change by making places of living carbon-free, and that will attract younger buyers to their home and to our community. That's what will sell, not the type of home that I live in, that most of us live in now. We're boxed in with dated heating systems that still pollute. This whole discussion reminds me as my work as a commissioner in Burlington. Several years ago, when we tried to ban smoking from our parks in Church Street. It wasn't an easy road to begin, but the ordinance worked over time because city leaders had the courage to step up for the good of the community. Now we look back, it's interesting, and we say, we remember when we had to breathe all that smoke coming from someone sitting on a park bench or on a restaurant table, and we ask, how did we allow that back then? Like banning smoking from airplanes and movie theaters, we can't imagine that occurring now, because decades ago, it was just controversial. And everything was not enforced by the smoking police. Restrictions on smoking became the cultural norm. Over time, non-smoking areas became what everyone expected. Your Climate Action Task Force recommendations will evolve the same way. The recommendations before you, when codified into an ordinance, will become the cultural norm of how to do business in South Burlington. And our children will look back and say, remember when they used to build homes and heat with gas furnaces? Remember when there were no renewable primary heating systems in homes and commercial buildings? Why did we allow that back then? Well, we're here again. At the crossroads, we must not deny, and of course, we must not delay. Please, work closely with your Climate Action Task Force and make their recommendations into an ordinance. For the sake of the future of our children, we have no other choice, and I'm confident you will do the right thing. Thank you very much for the time.
Is there someone? Oh.
So there is some, are we moving on to the actual ordinance?
Yes, we can.
Agenda item?
Yeah, I thought John's comments were a little more general, but that's okay. I mean, they are related to information. to
Can I
share.
offer some quick testimony? It's a process question.
Sure, Dave, or Daniel, excuse me.
Yeah, sure. Dan Albrecht, South Burlington resident, Proctor Avenue. My only question is really just about process, because I thought we were still in the middle of collecting public feedback on the climate change plan. So it just seems premature to take action on an item from that plan before that public comment process had ended. That's all.
Okay. Well, I think the
That's all.
thank you. It is unusual, I would agree. The Climate Task Force, I think, made a case and brought to us this ordinance that they felt should happen sooner rather than later versus the entire action plan, which is enormous. And the majority of the council agreed that we should at least look at the ordinance, see what it looks like, and consider earlier rather than later whether this is something that we wanted to adopt. That's not, I don't know if we will, but that is the process we agreed to, believing that this was one piece of the recommendations that potentially could go forward sooner, particularly since our sister city, Burlington, had already gone down that road. So that was the process we engaged in, Daniel.
So I'm prepared to make a few introductory
Please.
Statements.
Wait.
Okay. I will wait.
Wait, do we introduce Agenda 8?
Yes, we're now going to start Agenda 8, even though it seemed like we already did.
Can I cut our city manager off?
Yes, you may, because you did ask me permission.
Okay, sorry.
Not
about
to
that,
cut her
Jessica.
off, but to make a comment.
Do what you gotta do.
Before we begin discussion on Agenda Item 8, I just wanted to announce that I'm going to recuse myself from this agenda item. And with the chair's permission, I'd like to explain why. My employer is a nonprofit trade association called the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association, VFDA, Vermont Fuel. The organization has a diverse membership base, nearly 250 businesses of all shapes and sizes, but the majority are in the thermal energy business. They're either distributing the fuel, or they're selling the equipment that provides heat and hot water, or they're installing the equipment in your homes and basements that provide heat and hot water and cooling. Electric and combustion technologies. About 2/3 of my membership base, the same ones that install wood stoves and oil boilers and gas furnaces and water heaters, also install cold climate electric heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. That's their skill set. Not only do I provide them legislative and regulatory assistance to these skilled tradespeople, I also run a school. We've trained thousands of heating technicians, delivery drivers, people that work on your electrical systems, like S-licensed electricians, S-licensed plumbers, oil, gas techs, electricians, plumbers, fuel delivery drivers, thermal efficiency experts. These are my people. These are my people. My father is also a Vermont licensed plumber. He's retired, but still lives in Bellows Falls, where I grew up, southern Vermont, which is near the Massachusetts border, New Hampshire border. And as a teenager, full disclosure, I worked for the family heating fuel company. This is who I am. This is what I do. And this is what I know. And I have lots to say. However, I recognize the comments made on this side of the desk might be a distraction from what I hope will be a robust discussion by the council on what role the city should play in determining how residents are able to supply an essential commodity. Not a luxury, not a cigarette, but a necessity. Heat and hot water, and how that's enforced. Thank you, Chair. Really? I'll be over there.
Okay. We'll move on then.
Great. Thanks. So to be a timely staff responsive to the council's wishes and hopefully hold the trust of the community that I hope is not eroding at all. Staff has spent a bunch of time in the last 2 weeks drafting an ordinance for your consideration, as well as talking about how administratively we can do that. We could implement such an ordinance immediately. So what we have in front of you today is a quick one-page memo from me, a draft ordinance that Colin drafted with feedback from the team, the city attorney, as well as summaries from both the planning and zoning team and the fire marshal's office about how we currently enforce and permit such regulations. So starting with the ordinance, couple high-level bullets, we have based this on three main goals. We've mirrored the City of Burlington's ordinance. We've added hot water to that at your direction. And we have included language we need to make the administrative changes we need to make locally because our systems are different than Burlington to enforce these. You'll see a few highlights as you consider this draft. There are standards set by the Vermont Commercial Building Energy Standards for heating sources. There are not similar standards for hot water that we've yet been able to find, but they may be out there. We do want to call your attention to that domestic hot water regulation is not specifically called out in state statute. It's not been tested in the courts, so it may be considered under a heating umbrella. It's never been defined by the courts. We currently don't have a building inspector, which would be required to receive these certifications, so you'll see that that is contemplated in this ordinance. This would be enforced with certificates of compliance on all new construction, including single-family homes that do not currently have involvement with that process in the city, so that would be a new addition. And it's all approved through self-certification, including waiver requests. No inspections will be done, but enforcement mechanisms will be through the fire marshal's office. So that's the ordinance before you. In terms of future capacity, we believe that through the addition, thank you very much, Council, of having now both with Chief Locke on board, a fire chief and a fire marshal, we have the capacity to implement this ordinance as it's currently drafted within our current staffing capacity. If you, as a council, would like to explore enforcement and education as components of implementing this ordinance, then the specific questions we will be looking at over time are administrative support, building inspection support to actually do those inspections on single-family homes, and education and communication support. And if you give us that direction, we will start looking at that for the FY24 budget. So those are the introductory comments. Chief Locke and the city attorney are here. If you have any specific questions for them, obviously Andrew is here as well and is the expert. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Are there any specific questions by council members at this point?
Yes.
Tim?
So I'm just going to go through these randomly, not in any order. The revocation of appointments, section 7, it says upon recommendation of the city manager, the city council may remove the appointed building inspector any time. Do we need to add for any reason? I'm just curious. These are the things I just found. I was like, well, why doesn't it say for any reason? I mean, I don't know if that's necessary or not, but. Or is that implied if you say at any time?
We can certainly add that.
Okay, all right.
Do you think it's good to add it?
Makes sense.
I mean,
yeah.
makes sense?
Yep.
Okay.
We also have, it's under state statute, people have property rights to jobs, so we can't just terminate them willy-nilly anyway, but certainly.
I think there are also some minor, like, grammar, wordsmithing things that I found. I'm not going to go through them because this is just a first draft, so. I guess one of my first questions is, today, there are no certificates of occupancy that are given out for single-family homes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that something that we might want to change? If we were to add, so that wouldn't be specifically in this ordinance, right?
Correct.
So, but from my perspective, does Burlington require a CO for every single?
Burlington does.
Yeah.
All properties are subject to the building code.
Okay. So I'm a real stickler when it comes to making sure that new homes are built according to specifications. And I know that most builders honor that requirement. But I just don't understand why single-family homes have always been excluded in South Burlington. I don't know what the history is of that.
Burlington is the only community in the state of Vermont that enforces the code on single-family owner-occupied homes.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to raise that flag right now that I think that I don't know what the cost is right now, and I think I've said it before. Any new construction, this should be all construction, commercial, multifamily, single family, should all be inspected. I think it's in everybody's best interest that we do that.
But Excuse me, you're understanding that this may not be the ordinance in
Yes,
which to
yes,
put that?
yes.
So you're just raising that as a.
Yeah, because further
an
on, there's a
additional
description
issue.
of the
Okay.
certificate process, right? So these are things just caught my eye. And another thing was domestic hot water systems. And that's under section, okay, it's at B, 2B. So when I think about domestic hot water, I think of water that comes off of a boiler, but are you just speaking in general terms of just what a hot water system is within a resident or in a
Yes.
in a building, period?
Yes.
I mean, does the word domestic have any specific definition here that we should know about?
I think our charge from I recall the charge from the council was kind of the words that were used in instructing us to include that. So that was one of the reasons that we included it. I won't profess to be a utilities expert or a hot water or heating system expert, but we try to come up with language based on what the recommendation was. So that can change based on what the experts would say in this field.
Okay. So, I mean, I'd like to raise, I think that might be a problem, just might be, I don't know. And also, in the definitions of renewable gas, methane is talked about if it's sourced.
Excuse me, can I just interrupt?
Yes.
Matt, I think, had some information about the definition of domestic or where it comes from. So to answer your question, if you want it to be like
Sure.
rolling.
Matt Coda, South Burlington resident, 51 Winesap Lane, first time, long time.
So can I just make a comment, because I think we're going to get into this back and forth. So per our per our conflict of interest policy in the city, when a councilor recuses, they become a constituent. So Matt is now addressing the council as a constituent.
And a St. Bernard puppy owner.
Yeah. As the son of a plumber and someone who trains plumbers and heating technicians, domestic hot water is the water that comes that is potable. It's the domestic hot water systems are the water that is heated and that runs, that can come through the faucet that you can drink.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. So getting back to what I said before, renewable gas means methane produced by organic materials sourced from landfills, wastewater treatment facilities, and farms. Do we want to consider hydrogen as well? Is it too early to add hydrogen to that mixture, so to speak, as a renewable gas? I mean, my employer is talking about installing an electrolyzer to, turn water into hydrogen and inject it right into the methane, from the network for heating things at the site. And I think that's going to come into play more and more. I don't know how far in time that is, but just a note is that should we be adding that as another gas source, which could be considered.
That could be added at a later date when it becomes a economically feasible option.
I agree, it's not economically.
But on that point, I don't want to take you off your list. I know in previous ordinances, we've done a really good job of referring to state statutes so that if our language, so we don't have to keep evolving ours. So I don't know if that's possible as we go to the next version and iteration of this, but referring to any state-defined definition of what a renewable energy source is, which might encompass hydrogen in the future.
Okay. And then I think finally, there was the definition for solar ready as part of the certificate system. And as I've said before, solar ready to me is not enough. There has to be a solar kilowatt requirement that's based on some formula for the space of the house or the volume or whatever it is. And maybe we don't get it in this round, but really, every new unit that's built in the city should come with some solar along with it. And if you have to sacrifice either some land space or some roof space or some parking canopy space, I wouldn't call those sacrifices. Those have to be specified and codified in order to make sure it gets done. Because we get a lot of free sunlight over many months of the year, some months better than others. December's not that great, but May is excellent, and our last July was really good. So those are the things I found so far. There's also a couple of typos. I think the word stretch turned into sketch later down in there, but I can't find it. So that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
So my question is, and I want to restate from the outset that I still support doing what Burlington did. My pause is similar to what I had at the last meeting, that I'd love to ask the administration how much testimony or conversation they've had around the hot water heaters. It's unclear to me, especially with the two bullets in the draft memo, if we're ready. And I would love to know that Jesse, as well as our attorneys, have spoken to with regards to experts that understand these systems. More specifically, I've received, 2 emails from individuals today calling for questions about how hot water heaters could be electrified in multi-unit family or large complex places, if that technology even exists. The economics, the costs is certainly an aspect of this, whether or not they can afford the electricity to do it. I also am very interested to know who we've heard from as experts in this field, and maybe resident CODA can speak to some of this, but having to do with the safety. I just think of ice storms, and if the electricity goes out for a few days, individuals in high density housing that might not have the means to escape a severe weather incident, I want to be sure that we are not putting them up into a circumstance where they could be at risk of going cold in the great state of Vermont. So I'd love to know, seeing that Burlington spent 3 years drafting this ordinance, which again, I support doing what Burlington did, also on the ordinance inspections and so on. I'm really curious who the administration has heard from so far on the hot water aspects and whether or not we're ready to venture into that space.
Just a point about losing power. Even if you had a natural gas furnace, you wouldn't be able to get any power. You wouldn't be able to heat out of it because you wouldn't be able to light the flame in the first place, and you wouldn't be able to run a blower. But if you had a natural gas fireplace that didn't have an electric ignition, that had a pilot light, you could in fact get heat out of that. But that's the question: is how many units would have that? So,
pretty sure gas systems can run without power.
No. None of the cider mill furnaces can run without electricity.
So individual residential homes, but I'm talking about large multi-story complexes that can still draw and heat. My house, the furnace continues to run even when the power is. But I'd love to talk to heating experts that could.
Yours continues to run when the power's out?
Yeah, and I also have 2 stoves as well. But my furnace continues to run without electricity.
Is it gas?
It is.
Oh.
And is it hot air or hot water?
Hot water. So it's.
So then what pumps the water through the pipes when the power goes out?
I don't know. I'd love to talk to a heating expert, but I'm under the impression that the electricity as a backup source can still continue to function.
Okay.
Maybe it just clangs. And you think it's doing something. So have you? I don't think the city's taken testimony per se.
I'll jump in here.
All right.
Yeah, I'm assuming that everyone talked with Vermont Gas Systems. I talked with 2 representatives about the water heating, the hot water heat pump, and they had no qualms with that. It's one of their products. And I also talked about geothermal, and they said that is also one of their products, that they install pipes either way, and that is something that they're working on with a client in Rutland and would be open to doing that as well. So I received 1 email, I think that we all received from Patrick O'Brien, but he recommends that we talk with Vermont Gas Systems, and based on my conversation with the 2 representatives from Vermont Gas Systems, they are on board with this. They helped Burlington write their ordinance, and they just want to be included in any, policy discussions going forward. But they raised no red flags with regard to the current ordinance that we are looking at. So I just thought I'd share that.
Okay.
So Chief Locke did speak with Burlington or email with Burlington folks. Do you want to?
It was just that I reached out to the director Burlington Electric to ask why, why they didn't go after hot water in the first draft of their ordinance. And Darren's response was that just they're not the high energy consumption that the heating units are, and that in the future they may go back. But I think for them to get the ordinance through the first place, they wanted to just focus on what they were going to get the most gain from. And so while they may go back in the future, that was their reason for not including hot water units. And then I think anything beyond that, we just followed what we thought was your direction for including the hot water heater language in the draft ordinance.
Tom?
So in that conversation, do you have any distinction or differentiation between multifamily units as well as single-family residents? Because I can see the case for new large homes going up in the southeast quadrant to make those all electric. My concern is the high-density housing, that we just need to have reliable heating sources. So was that part of that? Okay.
It was not. It's just as simple as, why didn't you go after this in the first place?
Well, didn't Tom Getz say that the Summit property buildings would be all electric, no gas? Did he say that? That they were all split systems for heating and cooling? But I don't remember what the hot water was sourced from. Does anybody know?
I'm going to chime in. I want to say from the outset, I am not against. I'm just not quite sure we've heard from enough people to be ready for the hot water piece of this. So I could very well support it, but I want to confirm that, what you just said. And I want to talk to people that know heating sources for large complex buildings and that they've seen this language. And I'm just not certain that that's happened yet.
Well, I certainly have read a lot of.
Vermont Gas was on board. I just wanted to say Vermont Gas was on board, and I really don't know where that qualm comes from, Councilor Chittenden.
I think it comes from in large apartment buildings. The question is, what are the choices for construction at construction time to add in a water heater? Does each unit have its own water heater right, inside of it somewhere, like either in the ceiling or in a closet, or are they all located in the basement? I don't know. Maybe Chief knows. No.
I think it's a variety depending on the occupancy. And, often also when we were drafting the ordinance, we could not find a reference to language when it came to governing the hot water systems. So we basically applied the same standard as for the heating systems. So I'll just say it did feel like we were on a little bit shaky ground trying to find the enabling legislation that would, that's safe to say?
Yeah, the code that was referenced for the renewable primary heating system, we basically duplicated it for the, in essence, duplicated it for the domestic hot water heating system. And the same thing is for the domestic hot water heating load, and is fueled by, those standards are the same for both, because we couldn't find any differentiation between the two.
Well, I think Vermont Gas said there weren't state standards, right? Or they thought there were, but they couldn't put their fingers on them?
They think they are coming in future iterations of the statewide documents, but they don't exist yet.
So we could write it and reference those future standards when they are developed? I mean, we certainly reference all these other state standards.
So a couple things. I was traveling the last 5 days. My meeting with Vermont Gas Systems is this Wednesday, so I have not yet spoken or heard from them. But I also think the public would benefit from hearing directly from them. So I hope that we have opportunities, or at least we encourage them to either officially weigh in or offer thoughts, and I'm sure that will happen. Mm-hmm. So that being the case, I don't know if we can move forward with just the Burlington thing, the Burlington standards, which has some value and consistency. And then similar to the dog park, I would also agree, opening what we have to serve the community, passing this legislation which is consistent with the neighboring community, and then continuing to take on the hot water heater if we want to get this warned for September. But again, I could support it. I just want to hear from people that understand hot water heaters to tell us that these systems exist and that they will be safe and reliable for large multi-unit homes.
Helen?
Yes.
I would like to say that I'd like to go forward with what we have here And we could certainly remove it at the public hearing. But I feel comfortable based on my conversation that this will pass with, with regard to Vermont Gas's, input that without any reservation. They had none that they expressed to me. The only question I have is, we received emails from Andrew Chalnick. I know that Ethan is here and he was copied on these emails with regard to how some of these things should be phrased. I would like us to talk more about what Andrew is considering to be needed changes to the wording and to be able to just move forward. I see no reason why any concerns that Councilor Chittenden might have cleared up on Wednesday or not. And if not, then we could certainly, in September deal with those. But I have confidence that he will be satisfied on Wednesday. I see no reason why we should remove that based on my knowledge and directly from Vermont Gas Systems.
Do you want?
So I'd like us to look at Andrew Chalnick's, and I'm assuming that this is something that Ethan could weigh in as well, since he received that email. But with regard to the domestic water heating system, removing the renewable word, and then the meeting at least 85% of the building's designed domestic hot water heating load. He thought that could be removed as well. And then he also, in the second email, he added that solar could be a source of energy for this hot water heater. So he just worked it into the introductory paragraph and then still left electricity, wood pellets, or other renewable fuel used by conventional primary water heating systems. So that's the one question I have. The second question I have is with regard to the renewable energy. Wait, I have to go back to this device. Let's see. It's something with regard to a unit, whether the geothermal could be included in this. Trying to find the wording. It's not popping out at me, unfortunately. But if we could talk about Andrew Chalnick's, that could, I think, be of value. Darn, why is it not coming? Thank you for your patience. I'm going to find it.
Are you talking about where the solar fits in? Because it's B3,
That was
I think.
the one thing. And then the other thing was, it was like a unit. It seemed like, I was just trying to see if the geothermal could be covered by this, if this language covers geothermal.
Wouldn't it be covered by electricity?
That's what I was wondering too.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you're probably right. But I'm glad to have that confirmed. I do trust you, Tim. You tend to have.
Oh, Megan, you just muted yourself.
I said I trust what Tim has to say. He seems to have his technological knowledge, that stands the test. So the question then comes down to the solar, whether we include the solar, as Andrew Chalnick recommended, and then we just remove renewable, and then the 85% of the building's design domestic hot water heating load. Those are the two.
Okay, and why do you want to eliminate the 85%? I thought we were trying to keep this aligned with Burlington.
They don't have hot water, so this, I think, is, if I'm understanding, what Colin said.
Right,
it was
and
just
how do you
aligned
have a
with-
duplicative hot water system? That would be twice as expensive. Okay, I
Right.
get it. It's just for the hot water. Okay. Not the
Yeah.
heating.
Not for the heat, right?
Okay.
So are we suggesting that we need to add in solar heated water sources as a form of renewable? Well, it's not a fuel, but
Right.
it's a renewable energy source. So we're talking about
So it's-
solar mounted, solar heated water systems, right? I mean, that's
Maybe I
what-
haven't articulated my concern well enough, and I'm not against that. My concern is for the high density housing, and if there's clouds and if there's power out, I just want to hear from people that they will still be able to stay warm, and that's why I'm concerned with a hot water system that might also be heating some of the units or as a backup system if it doesn't have an additional source.
So who's online tonight to talk about large developments, compact, dense developments like the Snyder Bravermans? Are they online tonight? Anybody in the house?
Ethan's got his camera on.
Chris
Ethan's a
Snyder is
developer?
here.
I didn't know that.
Chris Snyder is in the room. Yep.
Way in the back. In the shadows. Almost. Andrew, do you want to speak? I mean, these are your recommendations, so why don't you go over to the podium and explain how you got to these, and then we can hear from Ethan.
So, hi, Andrew Chalnick. Thank you for quickly moving this along. Really appreciate it. Just a couple of things. So, we did hear that there are several large multi-family developments that are all electric or intended to be. So, Cambrian Rise in Burlington, the affordable housing being built in Morrisville. I understand City Place is intended to be built all electric. So I think that, there is certainly the technology for that multi-family, multi-unit, high density, system. And, there is a technology to service that. Having said that, right, the task force, after having talked to Jack Hansen about why Burlington didn't move forward with hot water, he said they just weren't sure, to echo some of your concerns, Tom, that it would be the right system for every large building. And so we did recommend an exemption, right, for folks that can establish that the technology is not there to reasonably service the needs of the building. That's in the presentation. And to me that makes sense to see how this evolves, right? So that I think that's how we would go. That was part of our recommendation. I think there are solar hot water systems that people use. I think that's kind of an easy one to throw in to the ordinance for hot water, that people should be recognized as certainly a renewable system for hot water. Some of the other changes that I recommended are just minor. We can talk about it now or later, really. And it's to your point, Helen. We didn't anticipate you'd have a backup to hot water. So my understanding is, for instance, heat pump hot water systems already have built in electrical resistance backup. So it's kind of built in. The technology's kind of standard. You don't need like another complicated statute which says you can have like a third backup. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Does that?
Helen?
Yes.
And I found the renewable district heating. What is that? Renewable district heating.
That's like when the McNeil, wood chip plant in Burlington, they take their waste heat and they would actually lay pipes in the city with, like, let's say steam or hot water, and then residences would be able to tap into it and divert that hot water into their house through radiators.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think
Thank you.
UVM has a system.
UVM, yeah.
The big system
that physical
like that.
plant behind the Howe Library pipes steam to lots of the buildings through pipes underground.
Thank
So,
you.
Yep.
Okay.
Other comments? Ethan, do you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, thanks. Ethan Goldman. Yeah, thank you. Andrew said it very well, so I don't want to repeat everything that he said. I think that the multifamily building heat with heat pumps is pretty well established from Burlington, and you're all sitting in a very large building right now that's heated with electrical heat pumps. So there's lots of solutions for that. I think that's less of a concern, and I guess I would also emphasize that, and I think Andrew made this point as well, that for multifamily buildings, there are definitely technologies that are available now that have higher capacity for those type of systems. There's some reports from national labs as early as 2017. There's some new equipment that came out in 2021 that's specifically designed toward those buildings. But I think what you've got for language around exclusions around economic inviability allows us to put something in place today that covers all the cases that make sense today. And as new technology comes out and as we get better at dealing with it, it will cover those new situations as well. So rather than having to chase it and saying, well, now for units up to this size with blah, 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 you can just leave it up to the builder to come forth and say, I looked into it and it's going to cost too much. And so it's not ready today. And then they can move forward with an alternative plan if they discover some situations where there aren't high enough capacity hot water systems for the particular case that they have. So I think that language gives us a lot of flexibility and takes the burden off of you to continue chasing the technology and put it onto the industry to continue, evolving best practice.
Does that satisfy you?
So I'm not saying I'm not satisfied. What I'm saying is I just want to hear. I have a couple of emails into this in my inbox today from developers and builders, and I just seem like they need to be heard from too on this ordinance, and maybe that'll happen on September 19th. I'll say as one counselor, I am completely comfortable with doing what Burlington did. I still have reservations about the hot water heater. They spent 3 years coming to where they got, and I'm just worried that we're pushing too hard and too fast on the hot water heater. I could get there. I just want greater assurances from those that understand these issues and the implementations of these better than I.
Does the ordinance govern when somebody replaces a water heater? Because it, like a natural gas one, just breaks and it needs to be replaced?
This is only new construction.
This is only new
Right now, it's
construction.
just
Okay,
new
but we'll touch on that in the future. Okay,
Yeah. That's when we get to all the houses.
right.
So I do feel the need to acknowledge, and I would recommend you open it up for other public comment, that, most of the time when staff is here before you, we are presenting on something that is core government service, that we are solely the experts on. This is not something that we are at all expert in. We have no capacity, we have no expertise on staff or expertise in consultants right now focused on helping us craft this. So you are asking us to craft this with using the expertise of our community members, which is fine, but is something that's very unusual for us. And I just want to thank Colin and Steve and Terry and Andrew and Paul, who, put a lot of other things down to pick this up and try and get educated really quickly, but it is not, it's not something we feel very comfortable doing. So if you want additional expertise brought in, we are happy to coordinate that. We have not tried to do that today in an effort to be very responsive to what you directed us to do. So just want to put that out there. I think you may also have other members of the community who would like to be engaged.
Are there other members in the audience who would like to speak? Yeah, Chris. And again, we'll potentially have a public hearing on this, so
Absolutely.
your reports.
So I'm Chris Snyder with Snyder Braverman Construction Company, and involved in city center development around in this area right now, and also along Spear Meadows, or at Spear Meadows on Spear Street. I think the point that Jesse just brought up is an important one, is that there does need to be a group of people, of knowledgeable people who help understand the dynamics that go on, both from the construction end, also from the energy use end, and also from the regulatory end. And so my recommendation would be, rather than, it's my understanding, if you proceed with this going to a public hearing, does this ordinance already come into effect, or does it not come into effect until after the public hearing?
We would have to vote positively. We'd have a public hearing, and then take that information into consideration, potentially make changes or not. And then the council would have to have a majority who were willing to vote in the affirmative for the ordinance to go into effect.
Okay.
This isn't like interim zoning.
Okay. I'm just
It would be
making
January
sure.
23.
Pardon me?
January 1st, 23, and 2023 is when it would
How
become
it's
effective. right?
drafted right now.
Yeah.
is that-
That's drafted, yeah.
That would be,
So
the-
in
that
4
would be the
months.
soonest if we voted in,
Yeah.
yes.
It's in
Yeah.
4.5 months. And so I think what I would recommend is let's get some more experts who understand all these parts and pieces and who can answer some of these questions about multifamily domestic hot water. There's also some concerns. Personally, I've experienced, I've constructed a building where we had tenant complaints regarding comfort within their home, using an using a heat pump system, and that those are issues that need to be understood before just making a blanket statement we're going to heat pumps. The other piece is there are expenses associated with heat pumps, and they actually don't last as long as other equipment that has been on the market that is using gas, oil, and wood chips or whatever. So there are not only initial expenses, but also continuing on expenses that can be more costly than using the current boilers and furnaces. So I just think all of that needs to be discussed and understood. And I'm not against energy efficiency. We build all of our product at a very high standard. They're probably I know that they are right now the most efficient homes that I've ever built. Hands down, the multifamily buildings here have extremely high efficiency ratings. And, with high density housing comes efficiency just in general because of how you utilize the cumulative systems.
I'm curious though, Burlington, I don't know if you were part of their discussions, if you do any development there, but they did work on their ordinance for quite a long time. So I'm assuming, but I don't have the facts to back me up, that they did ask for experts. They didn't go forward with the hot water, which I appreciate because that's, I don't know, maybe it's a little newer and the technology has caught up or is better than when they were crafting their ordinance. But I have to believe that they did get some of your concerns addressed to their satisfaction. We probably need to as well, but I also don't always think we need to reinvent the wheel every time we have a similar policy objective, if there's language that's has been developed thoughtfully and carefully. I don't know, maybe Chief Locke knows how much. Were you part of any of those
I was not.
conversations? Okay. So, but I appreciate, yes, we do need some more answers and some more people. And we have Matt there who probably could inform us a little bit.
And
maybe
Helen?
even tonight. Yes,
The heating does include the 85%.
yes, yeah.
So there can be a backup for the heating to respond to the concern that Chris Snyderman raised when we get very, very cold temperatures. So I don't know if he caught that, but that there is a backup for the heating.
For the heat, not the hot water, but yeah.
The hot water comes with the backup in the device itself.
And I did see that, and I did understand that. I still think that it's there's concern. One, then you're putting in two full systems because when it's 10 degrees, or 0 or below, the heat pump systems essentially their efficiency goes drastically down, and so they have to work even harder during those extremely low temperatures. And so I don't know what the spike in the electricity is or need is during those really cold temperatures, but then you would have to have a gas or a propane system already in place, run throughout the whole building as well, to ensure that you were able to maintain some temperature, comfortable temperature. Not asking for 90 degrees, but
Yep, I get that. Okay.
I just think that should be more opportunity for the city to gather some experts, maybe find out what the city of Burlington did and who they communicated with, and maybe there is someone who could provide some background as to how they landed where they did.
Okay,
You don't have to recreate it; just find out what they did.
sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Amy Demetrios of the Champlain Housing Trust, and I'm also I'm looking forward to the public hearing when we can have a broader conversation about this. These really are very complex issues, especially when they relate to multifamily buildings. So the affordable housing sector in Vermont has always been focused on energy efficiency since the 90s. I'd say we've been leading edge in terms of energy efficiency. We've put in wood-fired boilers, we've done solar hot water systems, we've done solar photovoltaic systems, we've done heat pumps. And if it were, and we've incurred additional expense to increase the energy efficiency, the insulation of our buildings. We really build extremely efficient buildings. And there is often additional cost, but we are willing to bear that because there are savings. We don't find that with electric heat pump systems in Vermont gas territory. In fuel oil territory, definitely there's a savings, but not in gas territory. So I was excited to see that in the climate plan, there is a provision to review your policies in relation to disparate income and economic justice. And this is an economic justice issue for low-income people and our ability to build affordable housing and not impact their rents. So we'll provide a little more backup information to those allegations at the public hearing when you hold that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
If I could just pick up on that.
Yes, you may.
So that was very well articulated, and I know that ordinances are difficult to craft, but I have so much confidence in our lawyer that I would welcome some sort of distinction between single-family residences of certain square footages and those requirements as well, and more flexibility or exceptions to just be considerate of exactly what Amy just testified to. I think multifamily houses that we all want to address our climate goals. As I look to the U-Mall and their possible redevelopment, I just want to make sure people living in high-density housing stay warm in the really cold winters. And so I want to make sure that our policies allow, and also that they can afford to live here. So I just hope that there is some distinction between multifamily homes and individual residences while still achieving our climate goals.
But I go back to what Ethan said, and thank you, Helen, for letting me jump in here. If this is deemed to be too expensive, so just like Chris Snyderman said, does that mean I should put in two systems? It might mean you just get a space heater for your bathroom when you take a bath, I don't know, or a shower. But it could mean that they would be exempted because it would be more expensive. So that exemption is already in there. I would prefer us, like Ethan said, not to say when it gets to this square footage, this turn, and you know, the different columns of exceptions just seems to be unnecessary when we can have people, developers pricing it out and saying this is not, you know, within 25 years going to be reasonable for us. So they can opt out and use an alternate source. And that's written into the ordinance. So there's just not locking anyone into a more expensive, more onerous, less doable solution. You know, it's actually giving them the option to opt out if that is indeed the case. So I sympathize and I thank you know, the two who come forward to speak to that issue, but I don't see this ordinance as something that would require you to take on a more expensive option.
Can I just point out that Vermont Gas Systems sent out a flyer in their recent bills stating that they were going to be increasing the rate 27% pretty soon. If you've been following natural gas prices, they've gone from roughly $2 a therm to $8 a therm, mostly because of Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine, right? And the instability of distribution of gas from Russia to Europe. So the U.S. is exporting a ton of natural gas to Europe and other customers as well. So the seeming lower price of natural gas is not going to hold for a few years unless something resolves itself in Europe with its gas distribution. But I see natural gas prices and Vermont Gas Systems bills creeping up over the next couple of years, just so you know that.
Matt, do you want to add anything, or do you want to wait for the public hearing? It's up to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Matt Coda, 51 Winesap Lane. I think it's really important as you go forward with the consideration of this ordinance that you consider 3 key points. And all you need to hear additional testimony. One is the technical feasibility. Can you build an all-electric home? Of course you can. Can you build a multifamily home and provide hot water using an air source heat pump given the physics of the building and the logistics of building something like that? TBD. What's the affordability? The affordability issue is actually not something that we can just price shop on Amazon. We actually have testimony before the Residential Building Energy Standard. We know that an all-electric home versus the current stretch code, based on testimony before the Department of Public Service, is $37,150. Big deal, right? If you live in the Southeast Quadrant, your home price went up twice that probably in the last 6 months. But if you're building a multi-family home for affordable, permanently affordable, and that's the cost per unit, plus we add on an impact fee for schools, pretty soon developers are going to walk away from what we want to do to fight climate change, which is to put high-density housing, affordable housing, where the jobs are. And that's the problem with this. And then the last thing you need to think about is environmental impact. So we heard information about the inability for certain systems, cold climate heat pump systems, to keep up during the coldest nights of the winter. Well, let's remind ourselves that we are a winter peaking state. That means the highest consumption of electricity in the state of Vermont occurs on the coldest nights in January. And yes, we're not like other states that are wholly dependent on coal for power production. We have a largely renewable portfolio, and that's a good thing. But remember, electricity is not inherently renewable. It is the movement of electrons between atoms. It's how the power is created that's either renewable or not. And on the coldest nights in the winter, here in South Burlington and across Vermont, we rely on ISO New England and their power producers. And when we're turning up your heat pumps and it's failing to keep up to provide enough heat, it's being powered by coal, natural gas, oil, and garbage, burning refuse, and wood, burning wood, all combustion power plants that we need in order to use electric heat in the middle of the night in January. That's not good environmental policy. Thank you.
And so I'll just say I don't know what the percentage of time that is or the percentage of total power consumed in Vermont, but like you said, that's a winter peak issue. The other 99.8% of the time, if that's what the number is, it's a renewable resource through the GMP portfolio.
It is very much competitive, and it can also be for multi-unit. And it's incredibly efficient and provides the heat and the cooling that we need. And that is something that Vermont Gas Systems includes in their portfolio. So I really think that we have to hear what we heard last week, that if we don't act now, we are going to have even more challenges within a few years. And it's already a big challenge for us, and we have to take a bite out of the apple now. And if it is truly unaffordable for CHT or for Snyder Braverman, they can make that argument, and they can opt out. But I would hope for many people, this would be seen as something we just have to do. We have no choice. We just have to do it.
So
we cannot continue on. I mean, I just don't know. We cannot do things the way things have been done.
So in terms of moving this along, like what are the next steps? We did have a couple suggestions from Andrew about some small language changes. Is the council interested in having them embedded in this draft for a public hearing?
I'm in favor of that, Helen. They seem to me to be reasonable and for my mind. And
okay. Tom?
I'm reading them now.
Okay.
There was like 5 I don't know how many emails, but I have to get up to speed and overlay the 2 different ones that are before me.
Well, I think, where is it? It's in 2B.
Right.
Under the definition of the domestic water heating system, you'd strike at least 85% of the building.
And the renewable, too.
And then we wanted to add.
What, do you want to just ask Andrew to walk us through?
Oh, you want to walk us through?
I could.
Yes.
Andrew, is the last email you sent just me all your changes in one?
Just minor, so I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
So I can screen share also
Okay,
so
thank you.
others can see what he's talking about.
Great, that'd be good. Thank you.
In a minute. Hold on. Hold. Too many windows open. No, that's the wrong one.
Here we go. Good job.
So since you framed this as to move along, again, I was traveling the last few days and I couldn't meet with Vermont Gas, and I need to hear from more experts that know building construction and so on. I fully support the first part. As for the hot water system, I could be a yes in the future, but for tonight, I'm going to abstain because I just don't know if we're ready to do hot water systems, because I don't have confidence. I always have confidence in the administration, but in your testimony, you admitted that there is no precedent for it and that you have not heard from a lot of construction. So I could get there. I'm just not ready to support it. So if that moves things along, I am an abstention on the hot water heater aspect, but I do support the other aspects of this ordinance consistent with Burlington.
Do you also, well, let's go through them because there's a solar. Well, you don't want the hot water though, so that's the solar would be
didn't say
hot
it.
water. I mean,
I'm not ready for
to
the hot
support
water.
it.
Not ready for the hot
Excuse
water.
me.
So I think the highlighted is what you're talking about.
Yes, thank
here.
you. So it would, my suggested changes, along with my earlier comment, would be to, instead of having a primary domestic water heating system, to just have a domestic water heating system, renewable domestic water heating system, and eliminate the 85% requirement in the language that I struck, and then to add that system could be satisfied with either a solar hot water system and or a system that's powered by the sources described in 1, 2, or 3.
I hate the wordsmith, but if we could just move the solar hot water down into one of the numbered units and below it.
However you want to draft it, it just seemed to me that wasn't a fuel source necessarily, but fine. That
it's a source of energy for that purpose, right? So
that
that's my preference, but might not be somebody
Okay,
else.
so add another
Add another one, 4.
in between wood pellet.
Put it at 1 or 2 or 3.
You could say, or fueled by solar irradiation or something like that.
Yeah.
You could say that. Yeah. Then there was just one other small change, Jesse, in the definition of a heating system itself. I think that someone had revised the Burlington statute to add, I think, a primary hot water heating system. And I think that maybe was just, to me, is a little confusing. I think what they were trying to isolate there is what type of heating system would be covered by the 15% exception to their statute, and talking about hot water heating there was confusing, but that's kind of a minor point. So I would strike those words that were added in that definition. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is that still 2?
No,
That
I
would-
think it's 3.
Yeah.
3?
In 3. Yeah. Can I, while I have the floor for a moment, I just, the research that we did shows that cold climate heat pumps today operate down to -20, not 0. And there was only one day in the past 25 years that South Burlington was below -20. It was back in 1999, and it hit -21 for a moment. So the research we did shows that, heat pump systems would, today's cold climate heat pump systems would work really well. In terms of costs, Burlington did a study. They had their electric department do a study and showed, for the most part, that it was a push, as I said in the presentation a couple weeks ago, with respect to construction, and mostly a push with respect to operating. There was one use case they found where operating a multifamily, multi-metered building rather than a tenant metered building was slightly more expensive, 15% more expensive compared, an electric building compared to a fossil fuel building. They modeled that when natural gas prices were 80 cents a therm. I think natural gas prices are almost double that today.
$9.
And so if that study were done again, I think you'd have a very different result, even in that narrow use case.
Okay.
Can I ask just for clarification, just to understand the
Sure,
language
yes.
change being suggested? As I am understanding it from your email and what the council seems to support your suggestions, is that in section 2B, it was a little bit unclear from what you were saying. I think one email suggested striking renewable, another email suggested striking
Sorry,
primary.
that was a typo. I'm sorry.
So we
strike primary.
So to strike primary in 2B, in addition to striking meets at least 85% of the building's design domestic hot water load, and, right?
Yes.
And then we'll add in 1, 2, somewhere in there in the small Roman numerals. We'll add a 4 for is solar hot water system, is a solar hot water system, or is powered by radiation from the sun or something along those lines. In addition, I think there is a suggestion in 2C, I believe, which was a non-primary heating system, to change the wording backup domestic water heating system to just water heating system.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
To follow the Burlington ordinance, correct,
That
yes.
the extent of the changes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Understood. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so those are some changes to this, but we also, let's see. Oh, that's the zoning permit and the zoning certificate of occupancy. That's a different issue. That's not the ordinance, right? So this is.
No, that's not that's your current ordinance.
That's
your
our
current
cur-
practice
oh,
under
okay.
planning and zoning.
And we
If
aren't
you go back to,
trying to
that's
change.
the document you're looking at to change.
Yes, okay. Oh, so the certification, is that? But that says the same thing.
So that's a new
is new,
certification
okay.
section that talks about how we will certify, how we will accept certifications from other professionals to meet the standard for
Okay.
the certificate of certification.
And are people okay with that? I know we've had different conversations about certification isn't good enforcement, and then other people, it's like, well, most people will follow the rules and will be better off, at least at the beginning, with enough adherence to this ordinance and these new requirements.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So if the ordinance takes effect, January 1st, 2023, if a developer already has permits for construction, does it apply to that new construction? Or is it applicable to any permits applied for after that date?
So the way, well, do you want to?
Sure, we can, yeah.
The way it was drafted is
Are
that.
you green? Are you green?
I am green,
Okay.
yes. The way it's drafted is that it would be applicable to permits that were acquired after January 1st. So if you received if you were deemed complete, stamped complete by the fire marshal or deemed complete by planning and zoning prior to January 1st, you do not have to comply with this new ordinance.
Okay.
And specifically for the fire marshal. So you could have your zoning permit in place, but it's at the building permit
Oh, okay.
point.
Okay. And even if you had your final decision by the DRB, but you hadn't applied, so, okay, all right.
We had to divide it up a little bit just because of the conversation we were having earlier about owner-occupied single-family residences, because if you're building a single-family owner-occupied residence, you don't need to apply for a permit through the fire marshal.
Right.
But you still need to go through zoning, so we had to have some test in place as
Okay.
to what would be the triggering event. And so for single-family owner-occupied dwellings only, a zoning permit.
Okay.
By January 1st.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Do you have the direction you need?
So basically, it's
Or I'm
Andrew
not-
Chalnick's changes and warn a public hearing if you so vote.
Yes.
So I'll move that we warn a public hearing for, hold on,
September 19th.
Thank you, September 19th at 7:30, which seems to be a good time for us. On the ordinance as amended for renewable heating and hot water.
I'll second that with some discussion.
Okay. So we've got a motion to set a public hearing that's been made and seconded, and further discussion. Tim, you have some more questions?
Right, so I appreciate the work that's gone into this draft ordinance, and I think that the public hearing should be that time that we gather a lot of information from not only residents, but also businesses, developers, and get their input as well. And we can accumulate that even before that meeting as well. But I just want to emphasize the fact that I want to hear from large developers and have some facts presented about differences in costs, performance. I would love for Eric Farrell to come here and talk about Cambrian Rise if he, I'll email him and try and contact him and see if he's willing to tell us what the success is like there. I'm just curious, so that's my comment.
Okay, so it's a public hearing, maybe the first public hearing.
Right, it could be, yeah,
It's a
it could be
public hearing and education.
Exactly, yeah. I think Tom has a comment.
Tom?
That's a great point, Councilor Barrett, and I think a lot of the answers should be answered then too. So I'm still going to abstain, but I want to highlight why before the vote is that Burlington has 12 councilors and they have subcommittees and they spent 3 years on this. So I just feel like where they got to is worth respecting, and I'm just not ready for the hot water. But I want it clear, especially to Avalon in your reporting, I fully support the other ordinance of this regarding heating systems. I think it makes a lot of sense for many different reasons, and I'm likely to support the hot water system after I get more information. I just don't think we're ready yet. So that's where I am.
And I appreciate that Councilor Chittenden, but I think that the heat pump hot water is probably some low-hanging fruit that we can pluck sooner than later. That's just my opinion. I'd like to hear some more information, but I think it's a pretty tried and true technology, and we should move forward with that.
Okay, so are you ready for the?
Can I make?
Yes.
That's 2 other questions.
Sure.
Are there other folks, in order to make this as an effective conversation for you all as possible, are there other folks you would like us to specifically reach out to and invite to provide testimony?
My interest, just to follow up on Councilor Barrett's point there, is really with the multi-family units. So when I think of the large apartment complexes, so I want people that know how to build affordable housing as well as attractive housing that is multi-layered to address some of our climate goals. I want to hear from them regarding hot water systems in this ordinance language.
So
I would like
CHT
Efficiency
would be good.
Vermont.
Pardon?
I would like Efficiency Vermont to send a rep if possible. Or to
think
contact them and find out.
VGS, if they will come.
Yes.
And if there's anyone else who knows about geothermal?
Sandy Dooley suggesting Green Mountain Habitat for Humanity in the comments. That's good too.
Green Mountain
That's an
Power.
affordable housing.
Green Mountain Power, thank you, yeah, yeah.
Whether or not it can support.
Yes, yes, that's the other part of the grid, huh?
So, okay, that's helpful. If other counselors, we're happy to spend some time doing outreach to folks.
Sure.
So if other counselors have ideas, feel free to pass them along or just CC me on emails you're sending and we'll try and keep a list of
And
testimony.
Matt may have some other names that he would share
Oh,
with
yeah,
us
that Mac guy.
as a resident of
So,
South
sorry.
Burlington. Yeah,
Even if it's a minimum written testimony, just as long as these organizations know we're considering this language. I'm not saying we need to cart them all before us at the next council meeting, but I just would love to hear their written thoughts and documentation and responses to what we're considering.
and we can hear from the Climate Action Task Force.
So that brings me to my second point.
We've done a lot of research and read a ton of stuff about, how feasible this is. I mean, it wasn't just something that we kind of were hoping and praying.
So that brings me to my second point. So on September 19th, you are also possibly making ARPA decisions, hearing from the Climate Action Task Force on the complete plan, setting your FY24 budget goals. It's a big night already. So just as a warning to the counselors, get lots of sleep before September 19th.
And don't complain if it goes to 11.
Complete.
So Ethan put into the comments Energy Co-op of Vermont, which installs both types of systems. I think that's useful to have the technical know-how.
Good.
Since we're
All
not
right,
paid by
so
the
we
hour, it
need
doesn't
to
matter.
agree to this, right?
You have to vote.
So are you ready for, we can continue to develop a testimony list, but, so those in favor of setting this public hearing information gathering on September 19th on this ordinance as amended, signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed? And an abstention. So it's 3-0-1, right? Is that where you put the abstention, I think? Okay,
Sue will know.
Sue will know. All right, well, thank you.
Can we take a 5-minute break? Or a
Yes,
5-minute
let's take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll move on to the resolution. I think the rest of the evening is kind of easy.
I like to hear.
You're still going to complain. You would. Down the cooling system a little. I'm cold.
Stop bringing a jacket.
Pardon me?
Bringing a jacket to city council.
Well, you know, I figured they wouldn't have it on blasting so high.
But anyways, yes, enjoy. I will. Like this is.
Today is the 15th, right? Yeah, tax day. Okay. All righty. So, pardon?
Can I ask Megan a question? Hey, Megan, do you want a virtual link? I didn't realize you're going to be remote. Do you want a virtual link for executive session, or do you want us to just call you?
Either way, whatever's easier for you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so let's, I'd like to call back to order the South Burlington City Council meeting of August 15th, 2022, and move on to item 9, which is consider and approve an update to the resolution establishing a capital improvement plan reserve fund. And Andrew is going to take us through that.
All right, thank you, Councilor. Really, so this is something I lay it out in the memo that Jesse and I identified as we were building the FY23 budget, that our current CIP has gotten, I think it's Alana's technical term, a little bit lumpy when it comes to the general fund expectations from year to year. A reason for that is there's been a lot of deferred maintenance, deferred projects because of tight budgets in the last few years. So what we'd be looking at if we were looking ahead to FY24 budget planning, if we were to fully fund, in terms of general fund dollars, the CIP projects in that FY24 budget, we'd be looking at $5.1 million. Currently, we have $2.6 million going to fund CIP projects, which means that alone would be a 15% increase in the tax rate. So what Jesse and I identified then as something to come forward to council with is how are we going to fix that? How are we going to smooth that and ensure good financial planning for these large ticket items that we're going to have in out years? One of the tools in our toolkit, aside from, as I mentioned in the memo, hiring a dedicated staff person specifically to work in capital projects management, including to kind of revamp and help us with putting together the spreadsheets and the smooth figures over the course of the X number of years, is also to have a capital improvement plan reserve fund. Going back through old council minutes, we were actually able to identify that in 2013, council did approve of a project of a reserve fund, a special fund for this purpose, although it's only been utilized to date for the city center reserve fund. It's only, monies have only gone in that were specifically identified as expenditures in the budget to go to this reserve fund. We're looking to revamp that and to utilize this for the full spectrum of uses that it could be used for. So we've dusted off that in your packets, a version of that resolution, and are recommending a few amendments. Those amendments are, we've eliminated the provision that this fund could be used to cover unanticipated or emergency capital expenditures. We think that our fund balance policy adequately addresses that. We're formalizing a policy citywide across our funds that for any CIP expenditures, anything that's unspent in that budget line would automatically be rolled forward into subsequent fiscal years, being rolled into this fund. Made a few general edits and clarifying cross citations to the city's current adopted financial policies. And we're also including an allowance that this CIP fund can have an unallocated reserve up to 20% of the total value of the fund. This means that if there's cost savings in a given project, that we can reallocate those to other projects if there are cost overages. And anything that goes above, just so we don't have a large, the fund doesn't become half unallocated reserve. We're suggesting that anything above 20% at the close of a fiscal year be rolled into the city's fund balance. And this also includes an authorization for council to reallocate at any time during the course of a fiscal year funds accumulated for a canceled CIP project or expenditure. And one thing I'd also like to note is, part of the reason why I don't think that this 2013 fund was used for the broad spectrum of purposes is we've talked a little bit before about how the city's fund balance was in a really dire situation back then. And so I think we have a great opportunity now that our fund balance is at we're at the minimum threshold our auditors required. So the work that you all did last year, administration did in FY21, has really allowed this type of long-term financial planning, this tool to better be utilized.
Okay, this must make you both feel good.
This is one of the most exciting things I think you will have done this year. I am incredibly serious. I've never seen a community that does not have a CIP reserve fund. It is to Andrew's point, it's what allows us to smooth out those expenditures year to year and accumulate money for things like $1.5 million fire trucks that we will never be able to fund in a year. This is an incredibly powerful municipal finance tool that we have not been fully utilizing. Mm-hmm. So this is just empowering us to do that as we come to year end in FY22.
We tried a couple of years ago. We didn't quite get it right.
It's super exciting.
This is the stuff I like too.
Jesse's very, very excited about this.
I am excited that you're excited.
Stability for our community. It's
exactly.
It's very thoughtful. Any questions? Tim?
Yes. Can you tell me how the 20% threshold works? I'm confused.
Yeah. So if there's a project, road paving is a bad example because of the recent overages, but if it comes in under budget, that any of those funds would go back into the fund as sort of an unallocated reserve. They're not dog-eared for anything. But we'd only allow that to accumulate up to 20% of the value of the entire fund. So if it's $1 million that's in there, that's set aside, that's allocated for specific projects, we would only allow $200,000 of that to be unallocated.
If it was unused.
To
go back in the general fund.
If it goes above 20, if that ever goes above 20% at the end of a fiscal year,
right,
that would go back. That would go to the city's fund balance.
Whatever is above 20%. Oh, okay.
It goes to the fund balance.
It allows us
20% goes to the general fund.
On most capital projects, you're going to have some projects that are a little over and some that are a little under, and it allows us to account for that without coming back to you each time and asking for more money or rolling over more money.
Any unallocated fund balance exceeds 20% of the total allocated funds shall be transferred to the general fund.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Is there further questions or discussion, Megan? You all set?
No questions. I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 So that passes 5-0. That's so wonderful.
Exciting, you guys.
Yay.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good job, Andrew. Thank you.
So next we have the FY22 year-end financial projections and several surplus allocation requests.
Yeah, so we've been talking about this for a few council meetings now. I think since the initial Q4 projections back when we closed the third quarter of this last fiscal year, we recognized that we were looking at a pretty substantial surplus. The reason for this surplus is largely there's been a number of unfilled positions with the city. We ended up logging some of our FEMA relief in FY22. We've seen much higher than projected receipts from our local option tax this year when we made very conservative projections for FY23 back, in October of 2020, right in the height of the pandemic. And also our permit fees are $400,000 to $500,000 higher than we projected also back at that time. So very significant surplus there. So we're currently projecting around 1.2 million in surplus. We currently are at a $1.2 million surplus and projecting that it could be above 1.5 million once we get our final local option tax numbers. So with that, and again, to go back to, we are in such a great position, or such a better position when it comes to the city's fund balance. Rather than designating all of that to go in to meet higher thresholds, recommended thresholds of 66.66% of our total operating expenditures being held as a savings, we are recommending a few expenditures at this point now, just so we can get in planning. For example, the paving recommendation, which is one of the 3 recommendations, so we can start planning for the spring season. We're also going to be coming back to you when we do close the fiscal year at the end of this month at the council meeting, the second council meeting in September, to talk about a few other potential recommendations for surplus funds. And I really want to highlight a very significant one. As Jesse mentioned, we now can, during the manager updates, we've received the V-Chair's authorization to go out and pursue an RFP for the Dorset Signals project. Our preliminary forecasts are that that's going to be way over budget where we were anticipating, and is in the FY23 budget. That could be up to $1 million, just to be fully transparent about that. So that if that is a council and community priority to get that project in the ground in this fiscal year, we're going to be asking for a substantial portion of these surplus dollars to fund that. One other thing to highlight, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, is we're probably looking in this fiscal year with the CPI increases and collective bargaining agreements not being finalized when we put the budget together, as well as our 19 Gregory Drive lease space, for example, which is not being utilized, and we're not anticipating that revenue, although we're trying as hard as we can to mitigate that now. We're probably in the whole FY23 about $500,000 as well. So that's something we want to make sure we have adequate savings in order to cover that whole, as well as other during the year financial measures we can do to shore that up. So the 3 recommendations for tonight in front of you. The first is, I think you've all seen, and it's in your packet, Trinity Education Center has an FY23 request from Dr. Childs. At the close of last year, the council approved $11,000 in funding to support it was seed funding to support the youth center. Dr. Childs has also requested an additional $13,000 in funding for this year from the same type of allocation through surplus funds, and I believe she's online tonight.
So we've
yeah,
given
sure.
her, given the entity $11,000, and this would be an additional 13 for this year?
Correct. The second request is fire and ambulance shared the memo that Chief Locke put together. Since coming on board, he's identified a number of critical needs that he's requesting funding. And finally is the spring paving projects, which I talked about. It's about $200,000 we're asking to set aside.
So just one clarification, I think on the Dr. Child's request, but Andrew, tell me if I'm wrong. The last year when you were allocating FY21 surplus funds, you allocated a portion of those to the Trinity Center.
Mm-hmm.
So it was in this fiscal year, but was with last year's surplus, just as this year is with this year's surplus.
Oh, okay. And they were not part of our $45,000 community.
Correct. Correct. Yep.
Okay. But you're asking, just so I understand, so you want, we're talking about a potentially $1.5 million, is that right?
Correct. Yep.
And we'll need $1 million of it for the signals?
Correct. If we're going to move, well, we don't have a concrete number on that yet until we hear back on the.
Okay. Well, let's say it is $1 million.
Helen, I have a question on that. Didn't we budget for that? Isn't there some of that money already in our budget?
So we have 600,000 in the expenditure line for that budget. We have a little over 500,000 that we have as a revenue coming from the grant source. But that doesn't fully cover the full cost. We're looking at a potentially over $2 million project.
Oh, so the $1 million is
in
what
addition.
remains. It's the remainder.
Correct.
So that leaves $500,000 for kind of, not play money, but what we can distribute, potentially. I mean, it might be a little bit more, but.
But the auditor wanted us to keep something around too, right?
Well,
Which was, how much was that, 300,000 or no?
Yeah.
So we're at the minimum of their recommendation now. The 8%.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. We're at it's 30 days of your total operating cost for the year. They ask to be set aside. That's the bare minimum. It goes up to 60 days, and then 90 days is the maximum. So $2.1 million is what we have now. That's at the minimum.
Oh, okay.
Question.
Yes.
On the Dorset Street lighting, since we have about half of it with the previous estimate funded through grants, is there any reason to believe that we can find additional grant monies for one of the busiest intersections in the entire state of Vermont, so that we don't have to shoulder that entire additional $1 million?
I mean, I think the answer to that is potentially yes. The problem with that is we would not be able to move forward with a project this fiscal year if we were going to delay to ask for those funding sources.
And how many years have we delayed this?
Hmm.
We were talking
4.
about this
At least 4.
quite a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Go ahead.
But
Yeah.
besides just wanting to get it done because we've been pushing this off so long, what are the other reasons why we should definitely spend $1 million of our taxpayers' money this year as opposed to pursuing additional grant opportunities and maybe taking another year or two? I'm genuinely asking. I'm not jockeying for one position.
Yeah.
So just as a reminder about this project, this is the hardware that allows us to, in future years, go to the adaptive signaling, which is what we have on Shelburne Road. So right now, as we've all experienced, there are significant traffic delays along Dorset Street at particular times of day. And this, once we get the hardware installed, then we can move into the adaptive phase and improve that. That will be a year after the hardware is in place. This is one of the number one concerns I hear from the business community along Dorset Street and from some residents, not all residents. Additionally, that's with the traffic we have on the street now. When we think about redevelopment at the University Mall, when we think about City Center fully redeveloping, we're talking about hundreds of new residents. Hopefully that won't be solely in cars, we'll be out walking about. But it is, a critical piece of infrastructure to enable that growth to happen.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand. So what did the pension plan, what did they want?
Yeah, so that was if there was leftover monies available, rather than having that sit in the city's bank account, that be added to the FY22 contribution, generating much higher interest than we would in the bank account in order to offset future liabilities in the pension plan to make sure we are fully funded.
So they wanted all of it?
No, they asked for somewhere between 100 and 200,000 to be allocated for that purpose. I believe they would be amenable if that's been eaten up by other sources that necessarily would not. If that was not ripe to happen this year, I'm not speaking for the entire pension advisory committee, but yeah.
Oh, that's why I looked towards
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And Trinity wants 13K, and Spring Paving is 200,
And the chief wants 60.
and the chief wants 60. And I don't know how much the climate action plan implementation wants or needs. I mean, I don't know, unless you
No idea.
want to factor in getting enforcement, you
Yeah.
know, and the personnel to do some more stuff about the ordinance or whatever.
Some of that can be folded into our budget discussions, though, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it should be, because it's a issue, yeah. So, okay, so that,
So all we're asking for tonight, because we're not at year end yet, so we don't, I mean, we are at year end, but we're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
at closing the fiscal year. We don't know exactly what the balance is going to be, so those three things that Andrew highlighted is what we're asking for tonight. You certainly can hold that decision until you know what the
Final
details
numbers.
are.
Yep.
Or you can mix and match.
We at least, I think, have to do request 1 and 2. In my opinion. The
1
Trinity,
and 2 being
the Trinity Center wants 13,000 and the chief wants $60,000 for at least new mattresses, and I can't imagine firefighters trying to get sleep on bad mattresses that, like, if they're sleeping on the floor, that really bums me out to hear that. There's nothing better than a good night's sleep on a nice, you know, memory foam mattress. Oh, I just want to go home now.
And I think that the paving is important as well. I'm willing to go with the 3 requests.
I didn't hear your question.
Oh, it wasn't a question. I'm willing to also cover the paving. The 3 requests seem valid.
I mean, I think the pension makes,
Well, we just have the
two.
3 requests right now that we have to talk about, right?
oh, and the pension is just. we don't-
That's an end of the year, end of the
Oh,
fiscal
okay.
year, yeah.
So the 13K for Trinity, 200,000 for the paving, and 60,000 for the fire.
So it's 273 total, right?
So
Okay.
you'd have likely $1 million, 3 or 4 left.
Yeah,
Okay.
Let's do it.
let's do it.
Is everyone happy with that?
Yes.
All right. So,
I'll move that we request surplus funding for request number 1, 2, and 3 to the Trinity Education Center for $11,000, the Fire and Ambulance Department for approximately $59,000
no,
plus.
Trinity is 13,000.
What did I say?
You said 11.
I'm sorry. Correct. $13,000 for the Trinity Center. What was the number? 59. Oh, what was it?
Oh, 200,000 for
59,125.
paving.
59,125 for the fire department, and $200,000 for spring paving costs for FY23.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And that's unanimous. Great.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
All right, now the approving the final rendition of our policy priorities and strategies.
So what is before you is all of the changes made following our discussion that I outlined in our memo at our last meeting. So this is for your final consideration, and also I didn't link again, but does include the work plans that the committees put together. Happy to hear additional feedback, but I think we walked through it in a lot of detail last time.
Any feedback? Any comments? Are we happy with all of this? It's a lot.
There it is.
It's sort of hard to take all of it, to take it all in, actually, I think.
Spent a good amount of time last meeting.
Yes, we did, but I'm just saying, for the, all right.
It's what your staff does all day, every day, in addition to core services.
Get it, yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, if there's no conversation or questions, I would entertain a motion to approve the FY23 policy priorities and strategies.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 So that's passed. Good enough.
Thank you.
And that's all she wrote, right? Oh, no, we have an executive session. Oh, I'm sorry. Reports from counselors on committee assignments. Did anyone have Megan, you wanted to do your, yeah. I think in the future,
Let's combine the two.
let's combine the two.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess maybe all of our meetings and discussion on our liaison work would go, under this, you think, or in the beginning?
So I'd recommend it be
In the
done in the
beginning.
beginning because it's when more people are here and we can make announcements and share information.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And so then will we also include like airport and, so we'll all do all the committees? Okay. All right. So Vermont Transit, is there any Green Mountain Transit?
Meeting tomorrow, still looking for an interim director.
Okay. And you missed the pension committee, and I had 3 meetings one afternoon. One of them was the airport commission, and I just couldn't do it.
The feeling.
So I didn't go. So I don't have a committee to report.
It's not officially a committee, but I keep reporting on it. So we had a lot of interviews with airport directors, and we will be advancing a few candidates for more interviews next week.
And I'll just add my voice to Jesse's to thank all of the members of the Affordable Housing and the Housing Trust Fund for meeting for several hours on Friday morning to go through 5 really, I would say, compelling projects for using our ARPA funds for affordable housing. So we'll be hearing from them soon.
Good. Okay. Is there any other business?
Just one item, in those interviews with airport directors, is it time that individuals can submit a letter of commendation for whom they think should be considered?
I think you absolutely can as a South Burlington City Councilor. I would just direct it to the Burlington HR department and then not necessarily me, just so it goes to the right
Send it
channel.
to the Burlington HR department?
Yeah.
Okay.
Give you a name if you send me an email afterwards.
Do you have a name of somebody there?
Yeah, I'll send that
Tell
to
me-
you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
very
good.
Okay. Good enough. So item 14, consider entering executive session for the purposes on pending litigation to which the city is a party. And that will be,
Andrew, myself, and Colin.
I have a motion. Would you like me to read the motion?
yes, please.
I move that the council make a specific finding that premature general public knowledge of the discussion about the Burton Corporation Higher Ground Environmental Court appeal to which the city is a party would clearly place the city at a substantial disadvantage.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right, having found, I now move that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing Burton Corporation Higher Ground Environmental Court appeal to which the city is a party, inviting in Jesse Baker, Andrew Bolduc, Colin McNeil.
Second.
Okay, with the understanding we will not be coming back.
That is true.
So the council meeting will adjourn after that, but we won't be coming back. All right, all in favor?
Need a second.
Oh, I need a second?
I second.
Oh,
You didn't.
yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Good enough. So that's it.
You good? Yep.
You bet.
You good, Travis? Thanks.
Thanks, Travis.
Thank you.
He's living in New England as a Broncos fan.